Sadly, the American dream is dead.
Hey everyone, the title of today's talk is The American Dream is Dead. And I know that's dramatic. I took it from the words of Donald Trump, whose words echoed through my head as I was thinking about this subject this morning. And I want to say, first of all, I don't think the American dream is dead necessarily. I think the American dream happens to be probably on life support. And what prompted me to make this video is the last couple of days, and what prompts me to make all my videos is things that are going on in my life. So I've been hearing about kids as young as 9 or 10 years old committing suicide. I had someone come up to me and talk to me about their grandson who's in high school, who has no interest in life anymore. Went from basically an A student to a failing student in a year. Says he has no friends, says he has no reason to keep going on with high school or pretty much I think with anything. Another mother talking to me about her son who is no longer interested in school, who wants to drop out. He is interested in entrepreneurship, wants to work with an entrepreneur maybe, but doesn't see any benefit to continuing on through high school. So a lot of kids are suffering from anxiety that's so bad it's causing them to consider and even sometimes to go through with suicide. We see the opioid epidemic exploding, especially among young people feeling so much pain that they just want to numb out. We see kids committing mass shootings, kids, as I say kids, 20, 30-year-old kids, boys, men, committing mass shootings, so angry that they want to take out a lot of people. So what's causing all this anger and frustration? There's some amount of isolation, I think, and loneliness in our society. I think emotionally we're not as connected as we need to be. I think people feel alone and isolated. But I think part of it is an economic anxiety as well. When I was a kid, I remember growing up and driving through like what we call poor neighborhoods, now you would call economically disadvantaged, and saying to my parents, I don't want to live in a place like this when I grow up. And they would tell me, well, Brian, all you have to do is make sure you get good grades, get scholarships, get a job, and you don't have to live in a place like this. And the time I was growing up in the 60s and the 70s, that was pretty much true. If you worked hard, got good grades, went to college, you could get a job and do very well. That dream, that social compact that we had, that if you worked hard and you would be taken care of, you'd be okay, is eroding more and more. I just saw yesterday Whole Foods announced that and Whole Foods is owned by Amazon, which is owned by Jeff Bezos, one of the richest men in the world, announced that no longer will they pay health benefits for employees working like 20 hours a week or less. There was a woman quoted in the story as saying she'd been working there for 15 years and it stayed there for the benefits. So this woman has worked there, given this company 15 years of her career to get these benefits partially, and then suddenly they're taken away. And we're seeing this happening more and more as companies are cutting back and and just focusing on the bottom line. So I think in our society, there is this frustration, this angst, this anxiety that we no longer have the promise that if we work hard, that we can get ahead. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of people working for wages that just don't pay enough to live. There are people that if you go to college, a lot of people are taking out student loans and coming out with so much debt that they're not sure they're ever going to be able to pay that debt off for the rest of their life. I can't imagine coming out of college, I've got my degree, and now for the rest of my life, I'm going to be paying for it. Another thing that prompted me to think about this video, and I don't like to get political, but I'm going to get political on this one, is that I saw the Democratic Party was being criticized by both people within and without the party, saying that they're moving too far to the left, that they're becoming socialists, they're getting away from their roots. And I saw an article talking about this, and they were saying that this is not necessarily true, that 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, 70 years ago even, the parties were both talking about things like, living wage for people, guarantee of jobs, universal health care. These things were promoted by some people. They didn't get as far as some would like, but part of the reason they didn't get very far is because it wasn't necessary. Wages were good and going up. Employers were offering benefits to be competitive and bring people in, so they weren't necessary. What's changed? We're seeing wages stagnate. We're seeing employers saying, I'm not going to pay for your health care anymore. Just as when I started working in the early 80s, remember, health insurance was basically free from your employer. There were no copays, there were no deductibles, there were no premiums that you paid out of pocket every month. You just went to the doctor when you were sick. We've seen that change from now. People are paying a big chunk of their paycheck, even if they're employed, to pay for premiums. They've got copays, they've got deductibles. And so even people that are working for employers, a lot of them are starting to feel some of this anxiety. And they know they're only a pink slip away from losing their health insurance, period. So I don't like to offer or talk about problems without offering at least some solutions. And this is where it's going to probably get very political. I mentioned earlier the Democratic Party. I'm hoping everybody comes on board with ideas like this. But I think healthcare as a right is important to people. People need to be able to know that they are going to be taken care of if they get sick without it breaking them or breaking their families. I think things like a universal basic income would be a good idea to give a real strong safety net for people. So people, if they do have to stay home, say, for example, with kids, or stay home to be a provider, a healthcare provider to a family member, that they can afford to do that. A federal jobs guarantee, some people are talking about. So I can know that as long as I'm willing to work, there's something I'm going to be able to do, and something that's going to be able to pay a wage that I'm going to be able to make a living doing. So again, I don't like to get political with these things, but I think this crisis, and I think it is a crisis, is bad enough that we need to really strongly consider it. Another thing I wanted to touch on is I was reading an article this morning, and so this is thinking about the whole idea of education. And we push our kids towards STEM, right? It's supposed to be science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So if you want to get ahead, become an engineer, become a mathematician, become a scientist. And that's great for people that have that aptitude. I have a degree in engineering. Engineering is great, but not everybody has that aptitude. Not everybody can do it. Not everybody wants to do it. And it's not necessarily fulfilling to everybody. I think what we really need to focus on is things like teaching kids about history so that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, teaching kids about compassion so that we learn to take care of each other, teaching kids about how to handle their emotions, teaching kids critical thinking skills. These are the things that make for good citizens and for a strong society, provide people with a sense of worth, and I think will stem some of these crises that we're dealing with. So again, I don't really like to get political in these things. I really couldn't see a way around it when I was trying to put this together, but I had to talk about some of this, because when people come up to me and tell me my high school kid is suicidal, my high school grandson is suicidal, I don't know how to talk to my son or daughter about, their depression and their anxiety. It's fine and good to have these one-on-one conversations. They're absolutely necessary. But I think we also need to look at systemic problems and systemic solutions. So for anyone that has any better ideas, I'm more than willing to listen to them. But I think it's to the point where we really need to talk about this in America. Thanks for listening, and I hope this helps.